Okay, welcome back. I've been, I got a comment left on one of my YouTube videos from Charles at Buy the Book 777 on YouTube, and that's what I've been going through. The whole thing is about he believes that amillennialism is somehow upheld by the Scripture, and he's given me his reasons why. So I'm refuting them the best I can and doing a pretty exhaustive job of it. So I hope that it resonates with him, and that he can come back and with whatever other questions. I did tell him that I would be on here this Wednesday. I would cover it live on the air. So that's what I'm doing. I don't know if he's in the chat room or not, or if he's even watching, but I'm sure he'll get the video. Maybe he has to work. He can't watch because a lot of people have to work. Yes. So anyway, there's no contradiction, he says. So if you see that last part, the dead bodies will rise in the second resurrection. Okay, he says, he's quoting, it says, at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the people, the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting contempt. Okay, so this is where you conjecture amillennialism out of Scripture. You can see it in there. You want to see it in there, you see it in there. What do I see? Well, I believe this is about the end time of Daniel's people, which is leading up to the end of the 70 weeks. At that time shall Michael stand up, and the great prince which standeth for the children of the people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since a nation, even to that same time. I believe that was the time of Jacob's trouble, and I believe that time of trouble for the national Israel was the time between the death and resurrection of Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem, because they were lost. Their sacrifice was no good anymore. Okay? God had abandoned the temple. The eternal flame went out. An earthquake happened. The veil in the temple was rent from top to bottom. They set up the abomination, the wrong sacrifice in the temple, as a standing practice until the temple was destroyed. Okay? That was their time of trouble, because what was coming, what Christ said was coming, the destruction of the city, the nation, and the temple. Judea was razed to the ground completely. The whole nation was displaced by the Romans. Never had such a time of trouble. The first desolation by Babylon, not that complete. They destroyed the temple and the city to a degree, but left a king installed there. Okay? And some of the people stayed in the land. Many were taken captive. The 70 AD destruction was complete. That's what's being expressed here in this quote. Okay? It says, at that time thy people shall be delivered. And I believe that deliverance is referring to the gospel message, that many were delivered because they listened to Jesus. Everyone that shall be found written in the book. Who's written in the book? Those whose sins are covered by the blood of Christ. So it's not about the end time of history, but this is about the end time of national Israel, the end of the 70 weeks that were determined, and that determination was expressed by Jesus when he decreed the judgment that would fall on Jerusalem at the end. And the 70 weeks ended, of course, 7 years after Jesus showed up. But that time of Jacob's trouble, I believe, was the time between the death and resurrection, or the end of the 70 weeks, and 70 AD. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, and some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And that did happen. When Christ rose from the dead, many did awake from the earth, and that was a witness in the land at that time. That's how I see it. And I have a historical view of it because I am an historicist. So I look for everything to be, fulfilled in history. And if I can find it fulfilled in history, then I go, that's it. And if you want to argue for a double fulfillment because you have a speculation of something that matches it in the future, well, then you have a speculation. And I don't really care much about speculations. Okay. He says, see that last part? All the dead bodies will rise. Oh, wait a minute. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth, that says many of them, but he's reiterating it or restating it as all. Sorry, I'm not willing to go there. I'm not willing to do that, but that's what amillennials do. He's probably heard that argument from the proponents of amillennialism and never took it apart. And notice that little difference in the language. There's always these little differences in the language when they reiterate something, and most people won't catch it. Okay? He says, I believe the 1,000-year reign ended, and that we are now in Satan's little season, yet that's the amillennial belief. You forget that the church fled into the wilderness in the first century, according to when Satan is loose after. No, it didn't flee into the wilderness in the first century. The wilderness fleeing was for 1,260 years, and that was during the papal reign of the Antichrist church, because the years match up. So I haven't forgot anything. I know about the church fleeing into the wilderness. Now I still feel like sometimes I'm in a wilderness. It's that feeling of being isolated from the world, but that wilderness that he's quoting there, fleeing into the wilderness, had a time stamp on it of 1,260 years, which matched the reign of the Antichrist. So I haven't forgot anything. So according to when Satan is loosed after the 1,000-year reign, he goes out to deceive again because now he can. And what does he do? Okay, well, I don't understand how he's fitting that together. But anyway, he gathers his army, surrounds the camp of the saints who are still in the wilderness. No. The camp of the saints during the millennial reign of Christ are not in a wilderness. Okay? Since the first century, no. The Antichrist did not start reigning until after Rome became a Christian empire and fell into grave apostasy within 100 years. Then the barbarian hordes came in, and the nation was divided into 10. Then the Antichrist rose up because that thing that was in its place was taken out of the way. Imperial Rome the imperium in Rome was taken out of the way so that the Antichrist could take the place and take the title of the Vicar of Christ, and what's the other word that they use that's Roman? I forget in my brain, but take the place of Imperial Rome and rule for 1,260 years. So that didn't happen till the 5th century. For you say Christ will reign in the future on earth with the saints, will still be camping with Christ in the wilderness. Now, I don't say that. So I don't say that. So for me to say what I'm saying would be ridiculous, because that's why I never said it. No, Christ, when his feet land on the earth, there's going to be a great earthquake. Check out Ezekiel chapter 14 yourself. Is it Zechariah? I think it's Zechariah 14. Sorry if I said Ezekiel, but I'm pretty sure it's anyway, let's look that up. Let's see, where's that Bible at? There it is. I think that's Zechariah 14. Oh yeah, this is it. And behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoils shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished. You think that could happen in Israel today? Could happen at any time. As a matter of fact, I think it will be due, especially with what Israel is doing right now. That recompense will be due to Israel. And many would agree with me on that. Because of what the nation is doing now, judgment must fall. Okay? And it will fall. For I will gather. Who will gather? The Lord cometh. He said, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half the city shall go forth into captivity. And the residue, so half of the people are going to be taken away, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. And how's he going to fight? He's going to fight them just by showing up. That's all he will need to do. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof, toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley. And half the Mount of Olives, shall move to the north, and half of it to the south. So you got half, and this great valley appearing. And ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains. Now he's talking to the Israelites. This is a Jewish prophecy to the Jewish nation, but they have no idea what this is about. They could have had no idea what it's about. But we can plainly see, behold, the day of the Lord cometh. Okay? When his feet land on the Mount of Olives. Has that happened yet? Nope. I think he was taken up from there. And in like manner, he will return to there. But it will be much more dramatic happening, because half of it's going to cleave in the midst thereof toward the north and the south, and a great valley thereof in the midst thereof toward the east and the west. And ye shall flee to the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azal. Yea, ye shall flee as like ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. So a great renovation is going to happen on the Mount of Olives there in Jerusalem. Half of the mount's going to go towards the north. Half of it's going to go towards the south. And a great valley is going to appear from sea to sea. And so on the west, you have the Mediterranean. On the east, you have the Dead Sea. And water is going to flow out. You can read Zechariah 14 for yourself. Shall come to pass in the day the light shall not be clear nor dark. But it shall be one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that evening time it shall be light. And I believe that's speaking of that valley that's going to appear. The light will never go out in that city. I'm calling it the millennial Jerusalem, because it's not the new Jerusalem of the new heaven and new earth. Symbolically, the church is the new Jerusalem, but until every living stone is added, it's not that new Jerusalem of the eternal state. But it shall be one day, not day or night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. And it shall be in that day that living waters go out from Jerusalem, this millennial Jerusalem, half of it toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter it shall be. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Lord, and his name one. And I call it the millennial Jerusalem. Okay, see. Let's see. B. Gabriel Smith says, can you have a quick 30-second summary? I think I did that already with this guy refuting. He was trying to argue. He was arguing for amillennialism. Oh, calling in. Good time to call. Okay. Let me see. Okay, Gabriel, I hope you're still listening right now, because I'm going to call you back and see if this works. See, that does work.
Is this on?
Yes, Gabriel.
Yes, this is Gabriel Smith in Nashville. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you for your comments in the chat room, and I'm calling you back because now we have time.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. So the question that I had was, I've been studying Luther's works since 2023. I have about 14 volumes on my shelf. And as I've been reading his work, it became quite obvious that historicism was what he was believing. I had never heard of it. And so I began looking into it this year, and you were the only person I could find. And so this is just a wonderful resource that I've been using watching all your stuff. But one thing that I couldn't quite reconcile was Luther had such a concern about, obviously, the papacy, but also about Jews. And I've seen today there's a dichotomy where you're either concerned about the papacy or you're concerned about the Jews controlling everything. But there's no real reconciliation from anyone proposed for how you could be concerned about both. Because Luther believed, especially towards the end of his life, that they were actively trying to control the Reformation and take it away from him. And so...
You mean they who?
The Jews. Luther was beginning to become convinced that they had actually infiltrated the Reformation in many different ways. Like one big example is, and this is even in Roland Bainton's biography, Here I Stand, if you've read that, about Martin Luther. And he was pointing out that, the indulgences that Luther was protesting, the collection service that was going around and hiring people like John Tetzel to preach indulgences, was hired originally by the Rothschilds, which had actually approached the Catholic Church and said, you should propose an idea to get people to pay back your debts to us. And they came up with St. Peter's debt scheme, where they then said you can pay indulgences. And that's in Here I Stand's biography by Roland Bainton.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but so I'm 100% convinced by you, though, that you're quite right. When people are going, it's either or, I go, well, it's quite clear that the papacy is the man of sin being talked about in the Bible. It can't be, there's just no other figure we give all power to in the church.
Well, I do believe that the Jesuits are behind the whole Zionist movement.
Mm-hmm. Would you, are you familiar with, let me see here, I wrote down some notes while I was waiting. It was a good thing I couldn't get on right away. So are you familiar with the British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli?
Not, I've heard of him, but no, not really.
So in the 1800s, and I was just looking for this because I was looking for any connection between Jews and Jesuits that I could find, because it's like which is influencing which. And I had the interesting thought that, Benjamin Disraeli, he actively taught while he was prime minister in the 1800s that the Jesuit order founded by Ignatius Loyola was actually himself, Ignatius Loyola, a converso Jew. And I thought that's quite a claim, considering Benjamin Disraeli is himself Jewish and being the prime minister. So I thought there are some people who were claiming that the Jesuit order was influenced. And I thought, well, why would they do that? Why would they get involved with that? But of course, the answer is kind of easy, because they were forced to convert in the 1400s. And when they were forced as Jews in Spain to convert, they were looking for ways to effectively continue their Judaism in secret without any sort of peer pressure. So they seem to have congregated. And this is admitted, I have the notes if you like them. Jesuits' own website is very proud of the fact that they were disproportionately made up of Jewish converts in the early decades of the order. And I thought that is really interesting, because some of the earliest historicist writings were written by men like, if you know the name Lacunza, or Ben Ezra. That was his pseudonym, Ben Ezra. He claims it was his pseudonym of a converso Jew. But it turned, and so they argue that he was really a Jesuit, a Gentile the whole time, and that he had just used that title as a kind of cover to get into Protestant circles. But it's interesting that there are these ties where they're claiming, because there's no debate by the Jesuits today, that their order was focused. Like Ignatius Loyola, I have a quote from him in his own writings, where he said, I'd prefer Jews in our order over any other people because they're closer to the Messiah's own blood. Just interesting quotes like that. And I thought to myself, well, how does that fit with a historicist view of Revelation, because really all that matters is when Christians are going out and they're looking at how we can protect ourselves from false teachers. It's really easy to identify a person standing up and saying, well, I'm in charge of all interpretation now. You can just set your books down and just let me tell you what to do. But what I thought was interesting when, and I believe it's Titus, it says, beware especially the circumcision coming in and bringing false works back on you. And I thought, this is interesting because the papacy starts, as you know, originally it's just bishops trying to get more and more control in Rome until eventually they're able to convince other cities that they have authority to teach them what to do. And I thought, this is so interesting. If Paul knew, and Titus knew, and all these individuals in the New Testament knew, that there's a lot of works doctrine coming primarily from these similar Jewish conversos. They weren't conversos then in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, but they were Jewish converts. They're coming in, but they're not letting go of the works doctrine. It makes sense that they would be the originators of a institution like the papacy within the church. And so that's what I've been studying, is there historical evidence that the papacy originated from Jewish individuals within the early church who never recanted?
It seems to be obvious, though I haven't done the research in it, that I'm glad you came along. I'm glad someone's doing that research out there. But it seems so obvious that the Roman hierarchy is really a continuation and a mashup between Christianity and old Judaism, in that you see like where the yarmulke, and they're continuing a priesthood, not Levitical, but otherwise, other than the priesthood of Christ, but they have their own priesthood. So they look at themselves as a continuation of what national Israel was in the Levitical priesthood, but instead in Christ, and they've developed their own apostate system by this mashup or mix-up of these things.
Yeah. It's so interesting when Luther, because, if you study Luther a little bit, you find in his early years, he's so optimistic.
I haven't studied deeply into Luther, so I'm finding this all very interesting. So I'm going to let you speak on and tell us as much as you can.
Well, that makes me very happy, because you can imagine how many people just on the street are going, tell me more about the subject from the 1st, 3rd century and whatever. But so in Luther's early life, he was very concerned that the Pope had been misled and just needed someone to wake him up.
Right.
So he's dedicating his treatises to the Pope early on.
Oh, yeah, the 95 Thesis.
Yeah.
If you've read it, you go, yes, he was a mad papist, as he said.
Yes. And so what changed for Luther as he's trying to get the Pope to wake up is he's going, well, the Pope's obviously the Antichrist here. And I loved that you found, because this is very reciprocal, I'm digging for this stuff on Luther, and first thing I look up on any channel is what do they have to say on Luther, because I'm always trying to find that stuff. And I found your video where you said there was an untranslated writing of Luther on the Antichrist. I believe it's called De Antichristo. And it had not been translated into English anywhere, but it was a systematized writing by him explaining, it looks like he fits the Revelation prophecy. And I thought that was fascinating because there's about 80 volumes of Luther's works currently either translated or planning to be translated into English by Concordia University. And none of those volumes, written or to be written, plan to include that treatise. And I just thought that was very interesting because they include a lot of very uncomfortable, politically incorrect statements of Luther, especially about the Jews. But it's interesting they leave out the one treatise where he says, oh, by the way, the Pope's the Antichrist. But anyway, my bottom line, though, that I was curious what you thought about was when I read Revelation and I try to understand, and I agree it's the papacy, the Antichrist, but when I try to understand Rome as Babylon, I'm having a hard time reconciling that, especially when they say this is where Christ is crucified, and this is where he's dwelling on the 7 hills, and these sorts of language in Revelation. I'm going, I feel like it could be interpreted easier for Jerusalem than for the city of Rome.
Well,
and I think what could...
Yeah, I believe the place, the intimation or the reference to Jerusalem, without naming it, the place where our Lord was crucified, I believe that's a reference to the capital city of Judaism, but it's a symbol actually referring to the capital city of fallen or apostate Christendom, which would point
Hmm.
to Rome. So I believe the
Hmm.
reference is actually to Rome, but using the symbol of the capital of apostate Judaism to point to Rome as the
Okay.
apostate city of Christendom.
Uh-huh. Was that your finding from what's that author's
E.B.
name?
Elliott.
Jorge. Yeah,
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 E.B.
Jorge
Elliott. That's where
Apocalyptica.
I get that from, and a couple others that before him.
Oh, okay.
So he
Yeah,
wasn't he
I've
wasn't
tried.
alone in that, but yeah, he did
Uh-huh.
finally write
I've
that.
tried. I've tried to find early church fathers and how they read that reading on which city, and it sounds like most of them also thought it was Rome. But a lot of the debates it's very confusing for me because a lot of it comes down to interpretations of the timing of when they're saying it because
Well,
the meaning of it.
another telling thing in the Revelation itself is that never once is the city Jerusalem explicitly referred to in the entire Revelation. We only
Mm.
find the New Jerusalem, but that's not the same city.
Hmm. Hmm. So in Ben Ezra's work, when he's arguing for, I believe he was the first person to propose futurism. There might have been one other person, but when he was proposing that Jerusalem was the central location, I think he might have been the first to propose that. I don't know, but he was arguing that effectively the Christians are waiting for a Messiah to show up who's going to come and basically rescue everyone, rapture them out, whatever it's going to be. And in your writing that you put, I believe is called the Abraham Accord, in that book you were arguing, I think you said that it's possible that what the papacy is doing in Israel is to sort of posture themselves into the prophecies that Christian Protestants are believing. And so the Pope himself is similar to the Messiah the Protestants will be expecting. Is that right?
Well, I think he's what I indicate there is that he's looking forward to the failure of Protestant prophecy, which he gave to the Protestants to believe.
Mm.
Okay, and then they will have no choice but to, when their prophecies fail, to turn to the Catholic Church because they will be standing there with an apparent truth.
Mm-hmm.
When the false truth they believe fails, that is the three rapture thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I
So,
was proposing there.
okay. Because and this is more of a gut intuition than something I've studied, which is why I'm talking to you, because I think you've studied it far, far more than I have on Revelation. But it feels so easy to me that if the papacy's involvement with Israel, which I don't know if there's anything in Revelation that predicts that Rome would get involved with the Holy Land again down the road, but it seems quite clear throughout the history of the church they have constantly tried to get control of the Holy Land again.
Yeah, they're still working on the Abraham Accord.
Uh-huh. And so your position was that this is an effort to invalidate the beliefs of rapturists.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
It's a trap for Protestant and evangelicals, because most Protestants have now just called themselves evangelical. The papacy, the Antichrist church, has pretty much made Protestantism a bad word now.
Uh-huh.
They don't like protest.
No, I forget. I heard some other professor somewhere say that it didn't just mean protest in the sense we mean it, but it also had some meaning similar to preaching.
Or witness.
I don't remember.
Well,
Witness,
the word is
something
witness.
like that.
Yeah, witness.
Uh-huh.
You can identify it with the witnesses of chapter 11.
Uh-huh.
The same
Yeah, that's
word.
exciting. Uh-huh.
Or martyr, because martyr and witness are the same word too. So martyr, witness,
yeah.
protest. We're all talking the same thing here.
Right. Okay. So I guess my biggest, boldest, least substantiated hunch here is that, especially since the Catholic Church was working to get control of Israel in the Middle Ages, it seems then that was partly defensive, just to protect Europe. But it seems to me that they've always wanted to have that land, and it would seem it would be very helpful to them to posture themselves as a Messiah. I mean, the Pope already claims to be Christ's representative on earth, and a couple of them have even effectively said they are God himself, although they try to say they didn't say that.
They don't believe in the return of Christ at all. They don't really believe that he's coming back. I mean, Catholic doctrine is that they will reign forever because what they're really working for is rule over the whole earth, as they had for 1,260 years over Western Europe. That's what they're really after. And so they believe in the millennial being a symbol for Roman Catholic reign in a world without end. That's their millennium.
Yeah. So in Revelation, is there, I mean, you said that it's symbolic, talking about where Christ was crucified.
Right.
For the Christians.
I believe that is to point to the capital of Christendom by pointing to the capital of Judaism and using it as a symbol for what the Revelation is a Christian prophecy. It's not a Jewish prophecy. So that would have to point to the capital of the apostate Christendom. Because it says where our Lord was crucified. Who crucified him? Apostate Judaism. That was its capital. So you got to pay attention to the part where Jesus is crucified there too. So who are the opposers, and who is crucifying Jesus in his church at that time? That would be the Roman Catholic Church.
But even for, like, in the book of Acts, and I don't know the timing of the book of Acts is, I believe that was pre 90 AD or 100 AD, whenever they're saying the Revelation was written.
Revelation about 95, but the book of Acts was before 70 AD, definitely.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting, because obviously in the book of Acts, a lot of the warnings are focused on the Judaizers coming into the church and bringing all the works back.
Yeah,
but
during the book of Acts, the main foe was the Judaizers. Even though they used Rome as much as they could, they were manipulators. But the main foe was Judaism.
So, in my mind, because Luther, one of his big concerns was he saw, and I've heard you contradict this, that you believe the papists control all the world's banking systems. Is that correct?
At the top, yes.
Okay. So I think I would disagree, just based not on scripture per se, but just based on what I've seen. It seems overwhelming.
I wouldn't use the word all either, but I would say the majority of the banking system, they do control.
Because there's just been many times, and I mean, the Pope himself actually opposed, for instance, the 1492 expulsion of the Jews by Isabella in Spain. Every chance the Pope has had, generally speaking, to stop a persecution of the Jews in the Middle Ages, and obviously today also, except for, he never said anything against Hitler being a member, but but he did interfere, at least as far as criticizing the decisions of these royals. And basically what the Catholics are arguing is the Pope was never himself anti-Semitic. He had member states who were under him that had different policies. But it's interesting to me that he would go out of his way to protect them in many ways. I mean, the Jesuit order in particular, when you read about, like, some of the things I already mentioned with Ignatius Loyola, his emphasis on it, the fact that they are so invested in Israel, to me, just screams that the Antichrist is going to try, and I believe Revelation teaches us, I haven't studied it that much, that he's going to try to put himself as the returning Jesus, not only for Christians, but a Messiah for the Jews and also the Muslims who are also waiting.
Well, he's already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or claiming to be. But doesn't he have to be in Israel in order to fulfill? I mean, for the Jews anyway, the Jews right now, their Messiah has to come to
That's why we
Israel.
have the Abraham Accord project. They're going to get a Catholic cathedral to represent Christianity on the Temple Mount. That's what they're after. So they'll have the Islamic mosque is already there. They'll renovate that. They'll build a Jewish type national temple there, and they want, of course, the Catholic cathedral, because if you look at the pattern for the Abraham Accords where they have already built, they have them all three on one compound.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, who is behind this? Who is behind this effort? But the papacy itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess my position, just on the hunch that I have, would be, because if you look at the control, the finance, I mean, the Federal Reserve, for instance, I don't know of any financial power stronger than the Federal Reserve, but they are overwhelmingly dominated by, I think it's exclusively Jewish. And my thinking is, they have, I mean, for a long time, they've understood you can't just walk up to a Christian and say, hey, I'm a Pharisee, come and do what I tell you to do.
Right.
You have to claim to be a teacher that already accepts Jesus's precepts, just with a little critique here and there. And that's, so my position basically would be, I think that the anti-Semites in general, on many points, I think they are correct, that the Jews control these things. I would say that the papacy is a creation of those false Jews in the early centuries of the church, and that they've continued it deliberately up to present. Because just with that theory, I know it's an out there theory, but it solves so many circumstantial problems. Like, if the Jews are not as powerful as I'm suggesting, why even bother with the land of Israel? I mean, the Muslim world's much more important. And I guess that to them, that might be more the reason.
Well, you have a lot,
they
you have
care
a
a
lot
lot
of
about
good
Israel,
points. You have a lot of good points. But I believe, as from reading history of the papacy and the Roman Church, I see that the papacy, anytime they see genius in any area, they covet that genius, and that means embracing the people that bring that genius. And the genius of banking that God has given to the Jews is very attractive, and was very attractive, that they became the Vatican bankers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, they work together, and that's why some people can mistakenly say that and put the Jews at the head, but the Jews are not at the head. That's not where the Bible puts them. The Bible puts the Antichrist at the head. But the Antichrist will, it says, he's operating right now in what the Revelation indicates, an era where his head wound has been healed, because he was severely damaged. The papacy was severely damaged about the time of the French Revolution, and by 1870 it lost all of its temporal power, even in Italy. But that was restored some 50 or so years later during the World War I, World War II era, where the healing of the head began. And I would say now the healing is complete. But working behind the scenes, even when it lost power, the Jesuits never lost power. They knew how to work in intrigue and behind the scenes, and they were only growing and continued to grow in their wealth and their influence worldwide during that time, and even till this day. So it's a very complicated picture we're getting here.
Yes.
I really like that you're diving into looking for those missing pieces, because I don't have them. And I know they're missing. I'm just going on what the Word says, so I know the missing pieces are there. I've been focusing on prophecy and the revelation and apocalyptic interpretation, whereas now you're coming along, you're filling in that gap that I've seen there all along, going, man, I wish I had all those pieces to fill in. So that's great.
I hope you're not running out of time, though I understand if you have to go.
We got about 15 minutes, so please.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so scripturally, though, and thank goodness you say this, that's the only thing that really determines this issue, is what's Revelation saying. Let's throw out the speculations. And I'm curious, have you read anything in Revelation that would indicate that the final resident, if you will, of the Antichrist throne is going to be ethnically Jewish? Because that would solve a lot of these seemingly competing who controls who type things.
Well, no, I see no indication that the Antichrist will be ethnically Jewish. I don't think it really matters because, what is a Jew and a Gentile anyway? I mean, the Jewish nation was made up of a bunch of Gentile nations, and Gentiles were continually being added to it. So, and now
well,
it's
I think
such
it would
a
matter.
hodgepodge. Are Jews really Jews? Or are they blood Jews? Or are they only proselyte Jews? And it doesn't matter. I don't think it makes any difference at all.
I think you're quite right about that. And Luther said that, he said, these individuals who call themselves Jews, and that's another interesting thing because Revelation seems to talk about that, people who say they're Jews but are not Jews. And I know you take a different view of that, not referring to...
Well, I take two different views of that. There are those who say they are ethnic Jews but are not, but then there are those that say they are the people of God, which is what the term actually means, because the Jews were the people of God. But as a symbol, they say they are the people of God but are not. They say they are Christians but they are not. So they could say they're Jews but they're not. So it could go either way, I believe.
Yeah, one of Luther's, his point was it's been so many, part of the promise in, I believe it's Zechariah, that if they betray the Messiah, and when they do, their people are going to be scattered. So Luther was pointing out, you can't even know what you are anymore because you've been scattered for so many centuries. You don't really have any title. You can't even point out your tribe that you're from specifically anymore. So you should just drop this sort of thinking. But to the Jews, it definitely is still important, even though they can't demonstrate a clean line. They still value that a great deal. And so I think for something like the Abraham Accord, would an Orthodox Jew accept a Gentile claiming to be, and I don't know if Revelation's claiming this, but I've always thought, it might just be some random idea in my head, but I've always thought that it all ends before Christ's return with the Antichrist claiming to be God himself, and he, in order to do that, at least for the Jewish people, he'd have to be ethnically Jewish. Even the Muslims would put up with this. I was a missionary to Muslims when I was 10 to 15 years old. And so when they are waiting right now for Messiah, one of the interesting things they'll concede is, and Jesus, the prophet, they don't believe he's God, obviously, but Jesus, the prophet's going to return. So if they're already tolerant with the idea of a Jewish prophet returning, then the Muslims' concern over a Jesus Messiah returning, as long as he respects the Muslim people, I think they wouldn't have a problem with that. But I think rabbis would have a big problem with somebody claiming to be their ruler or their Messiah unless he was ethnically Jewish. But that would just resolve a lot of the concerns that a lot of the anti-Semites throw up, where they go, it's not the Jesuits. You've got to look at how much they control, the media, the banks, all these different issues. But I think of one big example. Are you familiar with the film Spotlight?
No.
Okay. So that was surprisingly an Oscar-winning film, it came out in 2015, I think. And it was focusing on the pedophile scandals in Boston's diocese. And it won awards. It got national attention. And when I watched it recently, I thought, how did they let this get made? Why would the papacy allow something like this to come out, where it's all just, it even claims in the film that every single diocese in the world knows they have a pedophile problem, does nothing about it, and that it goes to the Vatican. They make all those claims, and I thought, this is a pretty bold movie, and it's getting awards. And the only thing I can think is the papacy, and this is what I think throughout history, because it's not a perfect, symmetrical system, but the papacy has served, certainly in the Middle Ages, this was true, was that it's often been, Gentiles sitting as the Pope, from what I can tell. But there have been times where they got a little too greedy and they got a little too powerful in their position. And when the Pope started to become too greedy, there were many times, I'm forgetting the name of it, but there was a war with 3 popes in the Middle Ages.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what that was. But there were just many times where the papacy got a little too big for its britches.
Yeah, that was at the time of Wycliffe.
Yes.
They had the three
Okay.
popes.
Yeah.
13th
And
century,
so
I believe.
Yep. Yep. And whenever they've gotten too big or they've seemed to gone out of line with whatever the agenda is, and in the Middle Ages, the armies weren't necessarily standing armies. The feudal towns would just have funds and try to hire, men to serve under the knights. But without having banking support, and this was Luther's biggest concern, he wrote this in a treatise in, I think it was 1543, it was pretty close to his death, and he said, the princes need to let go of the court bankers and of usury because they're using it thinking they're protecting themselves because they can buy militiamen. And that was how everybody protected their kingdoms back then. But he said, this is a disaster because this is how every battle in Europe's been controlled, because the banks can control whether or not they want to give any money to your cause. And so you change your religious doctrine to fit in and fall in line. That was basically what Henry, I believe it's Charles V, not Henry V, when he was getting rid of Luther's ideas and said, I'm not going to convert. That was basically his reasoning was, I agree that you're right, but if I agree with you, I'm also going to have all these countries funded by the bankers to attack me. That was even pointed out by Roland Bainton's biography, which is pretty tame, pretty mainstream biography. So anyway, I don't know the Revelation almost at all. It's been a while since I've even read it cover to cover, but I think that it probably has the answers to a lot of these questions about how this all works together. Because certainly, if the Catholics have been claiming this whole time that there is no rapture happening, there's just the eternal ongoing life as it's been going, only we get more powerful.
World without end. They love that phrase.
Right. Yeah, if that's how it goes, I think you pointed out in your book that many people not only would abandon the Protestant view, they just give up on religion altogether and stop following, because they would just go, what's the point? I believe this. And even though the papacy goes, oh, believe our new thing, they just become apathetic. And the Christian world's so apathetic already. But, the Catholic Church can always say you get special prizes in heaven and purgatory if you pay money, and people love that stuff. So there's always ways of luring them in. But I guess my issue is I believe the Pope's the Antichrist of Revelation. I don't have a problem with that. But to me, he does not control the financial strings that I see right now. And so I'm trying to figure that out, because it makes a lot of sense to me that you would never give one, even like in the Sanhedrin, you don't give your high priest complete control. He might, agree with Jesus.
Yeah, but see, the Antichrist doesn't have complete control of the world. He will never regain over the whole world, or even in Western Europe, although it seems like Western Europe's pretty much under his control. But he'll never gain world control. I believe that's a mistaken view. He had world control, but he will never regain it. He will always seek after it, and that's what he seeks after right now. So you can see that how he uses money to control the world is like uses his influence in the world as much as he can, like what he's doing to Russia now. Russia threw off the chains of Catholic communism and wants to reestablish its Orthodox Church. And I believe that's why they're being punished right now. And I believe this is how they work in the world. They don't have complete control. They can't just push a button here or there and have things go their way. Of course, the providence of God would not allow that and does not allow it. So this whole thing about the Antichrist ruling for 7 years, having a iron fist over the whole earth, that's all nonsense. It's pretty much going to be what you see right now until Christ returns. Then the fireworks are going to happen.
So maybe you can help me. Why do you say that communism was Catholic?
Well, because the root is Jesuitism. The root of communism in China and in Russia came from the Jesuits. They love to overthrow any country they can't control. They will overthrow using communism or whatever means they can, whether it's getting people to transgender their children like they've been trying to overthrow America.
Mm-hmm.
But, Russia, 150 years ago or whenever, it was not America. And America is a different thing, has a different founding, has a different purpose, and a different standing in the prophecy. So, and you notice all of the, I'm digressing, but anyway, I believe that communism is something that anytime the great whore church sees something or some genius that they can use to their ends, be it communism or banking or transgenderism, it doesn't matter what it is. If they think they can use it to overthrow something that is against them and to gain control, then that's what they're going to do, because they have no morals, no compunction. The ends justify the means in their eyes, even though they may never get those ends.
Well, I think you probably know more about the history and the evidence for the Jesuits influencing that than I do. But when I've studied the communist movements, I mean, those were overwhelmingly Jewish movements. Karl Marx, Lenin, both those men were Jews. And maybe you're suggesting that the Jesuits controlled them, so the Jews are like a patsy that they send out. And
I think that I express that in a lot of my writing, that about the layers of culpable deniability, because the great whore learned her lesson. She's not going to be seen burning books and Bibles openly in the town square anymore. She's always going to have some layers in between her that she is pushing to do her will, so that she is not seen as the one doing it. But the Revelation does predict a time when people will discover that she has been behind it all, and they're not going to be happy about it.
You say that Western Europe right now is also under papal control. I'm curious if you can
to a great degree. Even to a great degree, even Washington, D.C. is under papal control. But you look at the results, and the results are the fruit, and you know where the fruit came from. Like overtaking England. Oh, England bruised. The British Isles bruised the papal power mercilessly by falling away and taking all her properties that she thought she had claim to. And so she's doing everything she can to destroy the British Isles and Great Britain and whatever they call it today. But it's a mess.
Yeah.
You know who's behind it? Who's moving the pieces behind the scenes? Getting people, the nations, to do what they want, whether they have to bribe them with corruption, whatever it takes. Corrupt people will do anything for money, and they do.
You mentioned that, for instance, in Revelation, the symbolism is now all for a Christian world, not for a Jewish world. But I think that's like a hair's breadth away from being interpreted the other way around. But I've never heard anyone in a historicist context explain any other view than basically, I mean, maybe Luther did, but we don't have his translated systemized system in English. So it's kind of hard to study that. But it would be so easy. For instance, when it says not only Jesus was crucified there, but also the language warning about the synagogue of those who are saying they're Jews but are not Jews. And I know you would say that's talking about false Christians, but when that was used by Paul, he was talking about...
You know what? I would love to continue this conversation some other time, but we're running out of time here. I've got about a minute left.
I understand.
So glad to have you on, Gabriel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope we can get together many more times, because we have a lot that we could share with each other.
Well, you just go live as often as you can, and I'll try to show up.
Well, I'll at least be here every Wednesday to do this. So, and you're welcome anytime. And maybe we could even get your face on here with me.
Sure. That'd
Okay.
be fun.
Well, you got my text, so we will keep in touch. And I'm
All
out
right.
of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for showing up today. May the Almighty bless you all and keep you as you travel on the narrow way that leads to life. I'll see you next time. Secrets of the Rapture. Is there a 500-year-old conspiracy? A propaganda machine so pervasive and entrenched, yet so elusive that the entire world could be taken in by it, working in plain sight, but unseen by the world for what it truly is? If prophecy is God-given history in advance, why does the prophecy that has conquered the age also exclude nearly 2,000 years of history? What is it that they are afraid that the light of history will reveal? To understand our place in time and prophecy, we must look in history for an interpretation, that which stands the test of time, that which agrees with the Word of God, and history has proven to be true. When cunning fables and fearful speculations are removed from our sight, then we may clearly see what is truly expressed in Bible prophecy, both that which has been fulfilled and that which has yet to come. God's express word is the sword that must be wielded to remove the scales from the eyes and dispel the darkness of deceitful conjecture. Secrets of the Rapture was written to expose that which the spirit of the age has conjured out of the darkness to blind the eyes of the church in the world today. Secrets of the Rapture, Deconstructing Pre-Tribulation Dispensational Futurism by yours truly, Nicholas Arthur, is now available at lulu.com and Amazon. Secrets of the Rapture. Be informed, edified, and grow in the faith as your spirit is daily nourished in a biblical worldview, because you love the truth. FirstAmendmentRadio.net/MOBI. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Always listenable, at work or on the go. FirstAmendmentRadio.net/MOBI. No download or app necessary.